Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. I hope the week's going well. Ours has been busy, I must admit. Let me start off with the interview I did with Sneha Shah of Azuri Technology. This is the PayGo solar home system, and as I've spoken with him and been working a little bit with him, it's been very interesting. This market opportunity, 50 US cents a day, provides solar lighting, a phone charger, a radio, $1 a day gets you a television, and I just think to myself, that market is kind of infinite, isn't it, particularly in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa, former disc jockey Andy Rajoelina leads Madagascar vote before mid-December runoff. Madagascar court ruled that former President Andry Rajoelina won the most votes in this month's election, paving the way for a runoff against the ex-head of state he once deposed. He won 39.2% of the ballots against 35.4% for his closest rival, Mark Ravalomanana. The two will compete again in the final round on December the 19th. The outgoing president, whose name I can't possibly pronounce, but it's very long, received 8.8%. Madagascar is the world's biggest vanilla grower and the home to proven oil and mineral reserves, typically sees 10 selections. This is a great article in the Asia Times, Djibouti, the Casablanca of a new Cold War. Small countries with limited resources have been known to turn themselves into financial centers where dodgy banks and companies find a haven from international regulators as a means to reverse their national fortune. Djibouti, the third smallest country on the African mainland, has found another way to thrive, hosting military bases. Was known as French Somaliland, has leveraged its strategic location at the mouth of the Red Sea and some of the world's busiest shipping lanes running through the Suez Canal to lease its otherwise barren, rocky land to foreign powers. Has the seaside advantage of being comparatively serene in a region plagued by instability. France maintains a base here, as do the Americans, Italians, and Japanese. Germany and Spain maintain troops at the base hosted by the French. Then came the Chinese, when Beijing inaugurated its first overseas military base here on August 2017. Djibouti was turned fully into a modern-day Casablanca, where everyone seems to be spying on one another. It may be a francophone port city with an interior as rugged as Morocco's, but there is no Rick's Cafe here as famously portrayed in the 1942 movie with Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. Geopolitics is a lucrative business for Djibouti. The US pays $63 million annually in rent for its base, the French $36 million, China $20 million, and Italy $2.6 million. The amount Japan pays is not publicly disclosed. In that sense, China's new base in Djibouti is the first serious challenge to US military supremacy in the Indian Ocean region. China Daily was probably more frank than Western spokespersons, as it also quoted Liu Hongwu, a professor at Xinyang University, as saying that Djibouti is situated at the juncture of Europe, Asia, and Africa. In a sense, it is at the crossroads of the world. Nowhere on the planet are there so many military bases run by rival nations in such close proximity to each other. That proximity means anything can and likely will happen as the US and its allies confront a rising China. I touched on this in August this year when I wrote about the Indian Ocean economy in a port race. I said today from Massawa, Eritrea, admittedly on the Red Sea, to Djibouti, from Berbera to Mogadishu, from Lamu to Mombasa to Tanga to Bagamoyo to Dar es Salaam, through Beira and Maputo, all the way to Durban and all points in between. We're witnessing a port race of sorts as everyone seeks to get a piece of the Indian Ocean port action. China, the BRI initiative for Gulf countries who now appear to see the Horn of Africa as their hinterland, Japan and India to a lesser degree, are all jostling for optimal geo-economic positioning. Overlay the geopolitics, and it's worth noting that the geopolitics has become much more fluid. Previously, I'd written about China opening a military facility in Djibouti, and I said, when you take all those moves together, Djibouti was just one of them. It speaks to a material Chinese advance. South African all share down 12.79% this year. Dollar versus Rand 13.7375. Nigerian all share down 18.88% year to date, softening further. Ghana Stock Exchange down 0.7%. Tanzania's central bank suspended 5 banks from the interbank FX market for breaching regulatory rules, a senior official said on Wednesday. Barclays Bank, Tanzania, Exim Bank, UBA Bank, Bank ABC, and Azania Bank were all suspended from the market on November 23 for violating the market's code of conduct. The suspended banks either traded at off-market rates or did not submit to the central bank the transactions they made, contrary to the requirements of the code of conduct. Barclays Tanzania confirmed the suspension, adding it was working with the regulator to resolve the issues. The lender was still continuing to serve its FX clients, but has lost access to the liquidity offered by the interbank market. The suspension comes after the regulator conducted surprise inspections of foreign exchange bureaus in the northern town of Arusha. Africa exports its wealth for our enjoyment is a very hard-hitting article in the FT by Dave Pilley. This month, Tanzania's government sent in the army. The deployment was not to repel an invading force or crush a terrorist threat. The army's instructions were clear by cashew nuts. John Magufuli, Tanzania's president, and an African Hugo Chavez in the making, was reacting to a fall in prices, saying Mr. Magufuli is a thoroughly nasty man. His policies on freedom of expression, teenage pregnancy, and gay rights are reactionary, to put it mildly. Like Chavez, the late Venezuelan leader, his resource nationalism is likely to end badly. Companies will hardly be lining up to invest in Tanzania, and it goes through acacia mining and various others. But this is the interesting point. For centuries, the world's most advanced economy has used African slaves to pick their cotton and harvest their sugar. In places such as the US and the Caribbean, slavery has been banned. The West would now prefer to leave these workers where they are to produce what the world needs. The power relations remain essentially unchanged. VTB Bank blames error for $12 billion African loan. VTB's initial accounts for the third quarter of 2018 show the bank was owed $12 billion in obligations by the CAR, a country whose GDP is only $1.9 billion. Climate change in Somaliland, you can touch it. It is often said that climate change will hurt the world's poorest first. Nowhere is that potentially truer than in Somaliland, an unrecognized state in the Horn of Africa, sandwiched between an expanding desert and the Red Sea. A prolonged drought has killed 70% of the area's livestock in the past 3 years, devastating the region's pastoralist economy. We used to have droughts before. We used to name the droughts, but they would be 10 or 15 years apart. Now it is so frequent that people cannot cope with it. Somaliland is not alone. Across the Horn of Africa, a region that includes Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, parts of Sudan, and Kenya, drought has become the new normal. Changes in temperature in the Indian Ocean over the past decade, similar to the El Nino phenomenon in the Pacific, have directed winds eastward, pushing moist air that normally brings rains to East Africa away from the continent. As a result, some 13 million people across the region are suffering from food shortages. Well worth reading in full. And it goes back to something I wrote in November last year. I cannot help feeling that we're like frogs in boiling water. The governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, Patrick Njoroge, gave a press briefing yesterday, spoke of recovery in agriculture and the resilient services sector led to strong economic growth for 2018. We're still projecting overall growth at 6.2%, but we may revise this when we have final Q3 2018 numbers at the end of the year. Current account deficit at the end of September was 5.3% of GDP. Tea exports have been strong. Horticulture grew by almost 20% in the year to September. Chemicals and re-exports have also grown. Remittances have also grown to $2.2 billion from January through October. The foreign exchange market, and this has been a subject of some contention, remains well balanced. We expect the current account deficit to narrow to 5.2% in 2018. The CBK's own calculations support the view there is no fundamental misalignment reflected in our exchange rate. Kenya shilling reflects the currency's true fundamental value. He said that that the IMF is using Kenya as a guinea pig. The shilling could be overvalued by less than 5%. That compares with the IMF's assessment of 17%. IMF used a new methodology that's only been in place since 2015 to reach that conclusion. Formula has been based on an advanced economies and only now being applied to emerging markets despite its well-known weaknesses. We're being used as a guinea pig on the external balance assessment light methodology. The methodology was used in a black box method, which we cannot accept. You can see that in an image on the front page of the Business Daily. I wrote about the shilling and I said the IMF reclassified the shilling from floating to other managed arrangement to reflect the currency's limited movement due to periodic central bank interventions. Our calculations support the view that there is no fundamental misalignment reflected in our exchange rate, and I was just saying much the same, saying actually central bank has been incredibly effective at managing the shilling. Safaricom market share drops as Airtel and Telkom Kenya portions rise. Safaricom dropped 1.6 percentage points to 65.4% in the 3 months through June. Bharti and Telkom Kenya increased mobile phone customers at a faster pace. Airtel's market share climbed 1.7 percentage points to 21.4. Telkom grew 0.2 to 8.8. Mobile phone penetration in Kenya rose to almost 98%. As I said, that the finding that the shilling is 70.5% overvalued is alarmist and not borne out by the facts, as I said when I wrote about it on November the 6th. Thank you kindly.